Disclaimer. This story contains mature themes intended for adult viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. The night had that quiet, electric kind of energy, the kind that lingers in the air before something changes everything. I remember the way the garage lights flickered faintly, casting long shadows across the concrete floor, turning an ordinary space into something charged, almost cinematic. My heart was already beating faster than it should have been, though I couldn't quite say why. Maybe it was the way my husband stood just a little too still, leaning against the wall with that unreadable expression, watching me like he knew something I didn't. Or maybe it was them. Two strangers, close enough that I could feel the warmth of their presence before they even spoke. One of them brushed past me, barely a touch but intentional, and it sent a ripple through me that I couldn't ignore. I laughed softly, trying to play it off, but the sound came out thinner than I expected. My pulse quickened. Something about the moment felt suspended, like time was holding its breath. "Relax," one of them murmured, his voice low, almost teasing. It wasn't a command, it was an invitation. I glanced back at my husband. He didn't move, didn't interrupt, just watched. That silence said more than words ever could. I felt a strange mix of nerves and curiosity twist together inside me, pulling me forward instead of away. Their presence closed in, not overwhelming but deliberate. There was a confidence in the way they held themselves, in the way their eyes lingered just a second longer than polite. My breath caught as one of them leaned closer, his voice brushing against my ear, soft and deliberate, like he already knew I wouldn't step back. And the truth, I didn't. My fingers curled slightly at my sides as the space between us disappeared. Every small movement felt amplified, the shift of weight, the brush of fabric, the sound of my own breathing. I was aware of everything all at once, the tension, the anticipation, the way my husband's gaze never left me. Waiting, watching, approving. That realization sent a different kind of heat through me. One that made me straighten just a little, meet their eyes instead of avoiding them. There was power in that moment, in being seen so completely, so intensely. Not just by them but by him. "Are you sure?" one of them asked quietly, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. I hesitated, not out of fear but because I wanted to feel that edge just a second longer. Then I smiled. And everything shifted. Because in that exact moment I realized this wasn't just curiosity anymore. It was a choice I was about to make. And once I did, there would be no going back. It didn't start in that garage. If I'm honest, it started months ago, in the quiet spaces between conversations, in the pauses that lasted just a little too long, in the way we stopped looking at each other the way we used to. Marriage for us had never been loud or chaotic. It was steady, predictable, safe. And for a long time that was enough. Until it wasn't. We still laughed, still shared dinners, still moved through life side by side, but something unspoken had settled between us. A distance neither of us knew how to name. He became quieter, more observant. I became restless, searching for something I couldn't quite define. It wasn't about love fading. It was about something missing, something neither of us had the courage to say out loud. The first time he brought it up, it wasn't direct. "Do you ever wonder?" he had started, trailing off as if the thought itself was too fragile to finish. I remember watching him then, noticing the hesitation in his eyes. That was new. He used to be so certain. "Wonder what?" I had asked gently. He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Nothing. Just if things could feel different again." Different. That word lingered long after the conversation ended. First I dismissed it. We all go through phases, I told myself. But then came the subtle changes. The way he'd watch me when he thought I wasn't paying attention. The way his questions became a little more curious, a little less casual. It wasn't distance anymore. It was something else. Something intentional. One night, as we sat on opposite ends of the couch, he said it more clearly. "What if we stop pretending we don't want more?" The room felt smaller after that. My heart had raced. Not out of fear but recognition. Because the truth was I had felt it too. That quiet craving for something beyond routine, beyond the version of us we had grown comfortable in. But wanting more is one thing. Admitting it, that's where everything changes. "What are you saying?" I asked, though I already knew. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he studied me carefully, like he was measuring how far he could go without losing me. I'm saying, maybe we don't have to be just one version of ourselves forever. There it was. Not a demand. Not even a suggestion. An opening. From that moment on, everything shifted. Not all at once, but slowly, like a door creaking open inch by inch. Conversations became bolder. Silences became heavier, filled with meaning instead of absence. And beneath it all was a growing tension, something neither of us tried to ignore anymore. Which is why, standing in that garage now, with his eyes fixed on me and that same quiet intensity in his expression, I understood. This wasn't spontaneous. This was something we had been walking toward for a long time. And the real question wasn't whether I wanted it. It was whether I was ready to step fully into the version of myself he had been silently asking to see. The air in the garage felt heavier now, thicker. Like every breath carried weight. What had started as curiosity was no longer distant or theoretical. It was here. Alive. Pressing in from every direction. And I could feel it in him. My husband hadn't moved much, but something in his expression had shifted. His jaw tightened ever so slightly, his arms crossing, not defensively, but as if holding something in. His eyes never left me, though. Not for a second. That was new. There was something flickering there, something sharper than curiosity. It wasn't anger. It wasn't hesitation. It was something closer to jealousy. And somehow that realization didn't push me away. Pulled me deeper in. I turned my attention back to the two men beside me, suddenly hyper-aware of how close they stood, how easily they occupied my space without asking. One of them tilted his head slightly, studying my reaction like he was waiting for me to make the next move. The other let a faint, knowing smile slip, subtle but enough to make my pulse spike. They weren't guessing anymore. They knew. Still sure. One of them asked quietly, his voice steady but edged with something unmistakably bold. The question lingered between us, heavier than before. Because now it wasn't just about me. It was about him watching. I glanced back again, locking eyes with my husband. For a moment everything else disappeared. The strangers, the tension, the space around us. It was just us, standing on opposite sides of something invisible but undeniable. There was a question in his gaze this time. Not spoken, but real. How far are you going to go? My breath caught. Because beneath that question, there was another feeling. One he hadn't hidden quite well enough. He wanted to see. That truth hit harder than anything else. A mix of emotions rushed through me all at once. Uncertainty, excitement, a flicker of guilt, and something far more dangerous. Something that made my shoulders straighten. My hesitation fade just enough to matter. I turned back slowly, closing the distance just a fraction more. Not enough to cross a line, but enough to stand right at the edge of it. The silence stretched. Charged. Fragile. One step further and everything would change, not just tonight but us. And the terrifying part. I wasn't sure if I wanted to stop anymore. I didn't realize when the shift happened. Only that suddenly the space felt different. Smaller. More private. One of the garage doors had been pulled halfway down at some point, muting the outside world into a distant hum. The light above us cast a softer glow now, less harsh, more intimate. And without fully noticing how, I found myself no longer standing in the open, but slightly apart near the side wall. With one of them, the other had stepped away, exchanging a quiet glance with my husband, something unspoken passing between them. And just like that, it felt intentional, arranged even. My pulse quickened. This wasn't just tension anymore. It was direction. Still with me? The man beside me asked, his voice quieter now, more focused. Without the others so close, every word felt amplified. Every second stretched thin with anticipation. I nodded, though the motion was slower than I expected, like my body was catching up to everything my mind was still trying to process. He didn't move closer right away. That almost made it worse. Because it gave me time to feel everything, the way my heartbeat echoed in my chest, the way my breath came just a little uneven, the way my thoughts kept drifting back to the fact that my husband was still there. Still watching, still choosing not to interrupt. That choice changed everything. Tell me to stop, he said quietly. It wasn't pressure. It was permission. And somehow that made the moment feel even more dangerous. I shook my head just slightly, not stopping, not stepping back. Instead, I felt myself lean forward, barely noticeable, but enough to close the distance that had been driving me restless. My gaze lifted, meeting his fully this time without hesitation, without looking away. There was no misunderstanding now. Across the room, I could still feel my husband's presence like a steady weight. I didn't have to look to know he was watching, reading every movement, every shift in my expression. And that awareness sent a sharp electric thrill through me that I couldn't ignore anymore. This was no longer just about curiosity. It was about crossing something invisible together. The man in front of me exhaled slowly, like he had been holding that breath for a while. His hand lifted, hesitating just short of reaching me, as if giving me one last chance to pull away. I didn't. The silence deepened. Every second stretched tighter. And just as his fingers finally began to close that last inch between us, a sudden sound broke through the moment. Sharp. Unexpected. The garage door behind us rattled slightly, and everything froze. The sharp sound echoed again, louder this time. All of us turned. For a split second, no one moved. The fragile tension that had been building snapped into something else entirely. Uncertainty, edged with adrenaline. My heart pounded as I instinctively stepped back, the moment we had been balancing on dissolving in an instant. But then my husband pushed himself off the wall. Slowly, deliberately, and instead of concern he smiled. Not wide, not obvious, but unmistakable. Relax, he said, his voice calm, almost too calm. It's just the wind. No one spoke right away. The man beside me glanced between us, as if reassessing the situation, recalculating something that had suddenly shifted. Because something had shifted. I looked at my husband, really looked this time, and what I saw caught me off guard. There was no hesitation left in him. No quiet uncertainty. Whatever line we had been circling all night, he had already crossed it. You planned this, I said softly, the realization settling in piece by piece. It wasn't a question. His gaze met mine, steady and unflinching. Not all of it, he admitted, but enough. A strange mix of emotions surged through me. Shock, disbelief, and something deeper. Something that felt dangerously close to excitement. You wanted this, I continued, my voice quieter now. Again, not a question. This time he didn't answer with words. He just held my gaze. And that silence told me everything. The air between us changed all over again, but now it wasn't fragile. It was exposed, raw, honest in a way we had never allowed ourselves to be before. The man beside me shifted slightly, tension returning, but different now, less uncertain, more aware. Sounds like we walked into something bigger than we thought, he said carefully. You didn't walk into it, my husband replied, his tone steady. You were invited into it. That landed heavier than anything else. Because suddenly this wasn't just about a moment. It was about truth. All the unspoken conversations. All the glances. All the quiet what-ifs we had never dared to finish. This right here was the answer to all of them. My breath caught as I realized something even more unexpected. I wasn't angry. If anything, I felt seen. Understood in a way that was almost unsettling. You should have told me, I said, though there was no accusation in it, only curiosity. I needed to know if you'd choose it, he replied. Not push. Not convince. Choose. The weight of that settled deep. Because now, standing there with every truth laid bare, there was no more guessing. No more hidden meaning. Just a decision. I glanced between them. The quiet anticipation, the intensity, the undeniable pull of everything we had been building toward. Then back at him. And slowly, I stepped forward. Not toward the strangers, but toward my husband. Close enough to feel the shift in his breath. To see the flicker of something almost vulnerable behind his confidence. You don't get to watch from a distance anymore, I said softly. For the first time that night, he looked surprised. And just as the tension snapped into something entirely new, the garage door began to rise. The garage door lifted higher with a low mechanical hum, slicing through the tension like a blade. Cool night air rushed in, carrying with it the distant sounds of the outside world. Cars passing, voices far away, life continuing as if nothing inside this moment had shifted. But everything had. No one spoke at first. The silence wasn't fragile anymore. It was heavy, grounded, real. I stood close to my husband now, closer than I had been in a long time. Close enough to see the conflict he could no longer hide. The confidence from moments ago had cracked, revealing something deeper beneath it. Uncertainty, maybe even fear. You really went through with it, I said quietly. This time there was weight behind my words. Not accusation, not approval, just truth. He exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair as if trying to catch up with everything that had just happened. I didn't know if you would, he admitted. I didn't know if we would. That honesty hit harder than anything else tonight. Because for the first time this wasn't about control or curiosity or pushing boundaries. It was about us. What were you hoping for? I asked, my voice steady but softer now. He hesitated. And that hesitation said everything. I thought, maybe it would bring something back, he said finally. Or show us what we've been avoiding. Behind us, the two men shifted, no longer part of the tension the same way they had been before. What once felt like a charged presence now felt distant. Like they had stepped into something deeply personal without realizing how far it would go. You should go, my husband said to them, not coldly, but with quiet finality. They exchanged a brief glance, then nodded. No resistance. No questions. Just a silent understanding that whatever this was, it no longer belonged to them. As the door continued to rise, they stepped out into the night, leaving us alone in the echo of everything that had just unfolded. The moment the garage fell quiet again, the weight of it all settled in. I crossed my arms, not defensively but to hold myself together. You don't get to experiment with us like that without consequences. I know, he said immediately. No excuses. No deflection. That alone made it harder to stay angry. I felt like I was losing you, he continued, his voice lower now. And instead of saying it, I tried to prove something. To you. To myself. There it was. The truth we had been circling for months. I swallowed, feeling the edge of emotion I had been holding back finally break through. You weren't losing me, I said. You just stopped reaching for me. That landed hard. His expression shifted, the realization cutting deeper than anything else tonight. For a moment neither of us moved, just stood there in the aftermath, stripped of pretense, of assumptions, of everything we had been hiding behind. Then slowly he stepped closer. Not with confidence, but with intention. I'm here now, he said. Simple. Uncertain. Real. I studied him, searching for the difference, and finding it. Not in what he was saying but in how he was saying it. And for the first time in a long time it felt honest. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding, the tension in my shoulders easing just slightly. Then don't stand there, I said softly. A pause. Then another step closer. Not rushed. Not forced. Just enough. And in that quiet, fragile space between everything we had risked and everything we still had, we chose each other again. The night felt quieter after everything settled, like the world itself had taken a step back to let us breathe. We didn't rush. For once, neither of us tried to fill the silence with explanations or questions. The tension that had once pressed between us had softened into something else. Something warmer, steadier, real. I stayed where I was, close enough to feel his presence without it overwhelming me. And he didn't reach for me immediately, didn't assume anything. That, more than anything, felt different. It felt earned. You know, I said quietly, breaking the silence. For a moment, I thought we'd already lost this. My voice didn't shake, but it carried the weight of how close we had come. He nodded slowly, his gaze never leaving mine. So did I. There was no defensiveness in him now. No distance. Just honesty. And somehow, that honesty felt more intimate than anything else that had happened tonight. I didn't need something new, I continued, my tone softening. I just needed to feel like you still saw me. The words lingered between us, fragile but certain. I do, he said, stepping just a little closer. I just forgot how to show it. That small admission closed the last of the distance between us. This time when he reached for my hand, I didn't hesitate. His touch was gentle, nothing like the charged energy from earlier. This wasn't about tension or curiosity anymore. It was about connection. Familiar but renewed. And stronger. I let my fingers settle into his, feeling the quiet reassurance in something so simple. So grounding. For a moment we just stood there like that. The open garage framing the night behind us. The cool air brushing past as if carrying everything we were leaving behind. What happens now? He asked. It wasn't fear in his voice. Just openness. I smiled, soft, certain, and maybe a little relieved. Now we stop guessing, I said. And start choosing. Every day. He let out a quiet breath, like something heavy had finally lifted. I can do that, he replied. I know. And for the first time in a long time, I really did. He stepped closer slowly, giving me time to pull away if I needed to. I didn't. Instead, I leaned into him, resting my head lightly against his chest. His arms wrapped around me, not tightly, not urgently, but securely, like he understood that this moment didn't need intensity to matter. It just needed truth. We stood there for a while, holding on to something we had almost let slip away. No audience. No tension. Just us. Relearning. Rebuilding. Choosing. And as the night stretched on, no longer heavy but calm and open, I realized something that made everything else worth it. We hadn't broken. We had just found our way back differently. And somehow, that made what we had even stronger than before.